Great. Well, thank you for being here, everyone. It's helpful to get a sense of where everyone's at. So this presentation is geared to be more focused on founder-led sales, which in a moment we're going to talk about why founder-led sales is very different than sales and how to kind of optimize for that. Before we get started, my name is Tyler Brown. I'm the founder of Haystack. Haystack is an early stage data enrichment platform, similar to Clay if you've ever used that, but more AI native and easier to use. I'm also joined here by Parsa, who's a local expert on GTM, and we're super happy to have him here as a guest, tag teaming along on this presentation.
Yeah.
Do you want to give a quick intro on yourself?
A little bit more context there. I spent 2 years at the Allen Institute Startup Incubator running the customer discovery for everybody, as well as later I spent a couple months contracting full-time for a couple different companies to help out with their go-to-market. And yeah, that's kind of me. That's the short version anyways.
Yeah, and Parsa was actually just on a large-scale GTM event like 2 weeks ago at the AI House.
Yeah.
And there were like hundreds of people there, so you're getting him in a much more intimate setting, which is awesome. So he's definitely like one of the go-to people I look to for like what are like the latest strategies for outbound that like people haven't tried yet that are still like really working. He's your guy for that.
There was also the Graham and Walker event.
Yeah.
At Foundations.
Yeah.
I don't know, were any of you there? Maybe not. Okay, that's all right. So I was here just a little bit ago for something too. So
yeah. So he's one of the best people in Seattle to talk about kind of like the latest and greatest sales outbound workflows. All right, so we went through that. So a big part of the discussion today is I want to talk about what it takes to get to 1 million ARR, because a lot of times that's kind of like a milestone that a lot of early stage companies will reach and say like, okay, we probably have some sort of PMF at this point. Now we're going to start thinking about going into more traditional sales. So the question is, how do you get there? Well, I want to just quickly deconstruct this number a little bit so you have a better idea of like what that actually means. So if you're making 1 million ARR, that means you're making $83K a month in MRR. If you're selling a product at $500 a month, that means you need to get 166 customers. If you're so bold as to charge 5,000, then it's only 16 customers, right? Like it's actually not that much when you think about it. And of course, we're assuming that these are monthly kind of reoccurring subscribers that never churn. But that's just kind of to give you some context on what that number actually means. And so like now I want to talk about how would you actually get to that number, right? As a solo founder or as a small founding team where maybe one person is actually doing sales full time. Well, let's say that you're sending just 10 emails a day, high quality emails, which I'm going to talk about why that's super important to kind of start with a small number of high quality outreach, and you're getting 1.5 meetings a day. Well, that's going to end up translating to 8 customers a month, assuming you have this conversion ratio of, for every 7.5 meetings, 2 customers end up becoming paying customers, which honestly, if you're doing things right, these metrics should be very achievable, and you should think about this in the back of your mind. How do I stack up to this right now? Some of you might be thinking about outbound in the sense of like quantity, spray and pray, but again, we're going to be emphasizing quality here, and I'll kind of explain why. But this is kind of like, if you're just doing this, you're getting 8 customers a month, right? And so look at this. Let's say your product is selling for $500 a month, and you're doing 8 meetings a month, right? Through the 10 emails a day, 5 days a week. You're going to hit your 1 million ARR in 12 months. And that's assuming that you have like, this inbound ratio basically means like as your company grows, there's some like referral rate that kicks in. 18% of your customers might come from inbound, right? So like eventually about halfway through, your inbound channel will actually become more effective than your outbound if you just kind of look at this percentage rate here of 8% kind of compounding, which honestly is kind of a good way to think about it. As your product grows, you will start to get referrals. I know some of you have already gotten referrals, even though we're like super early stage, which is great. So again, I'm just trying to deconstruct this number and show you how achievable it is if you just kind of like take these incremental steps every day, right? Because like at the end of the day, you might not even have a single meeting generated, but at the end of the week, if you have like 2 customers that you signed up, you can see how this translates into 1 million ARR. Okay, so I know there's some engineers here in the room, so I wanted to actually express revenue as a formula here because I want to emphasize how we should be spending our time with sales. So by the way, based off this formula, can someone guess as to which letter is going to be the most important to scale? P, yeah, P, okay. So, so revenue equals number of opportunities to the power of P times the conversion rate from salesperson. So does this kind of make sense when you think about this? Basically what we're saying is like kind of the value that the product provides is the most important thing, and I'm going to call that like PMF. Obviously, you can scale that by having more meetings with people. If you have the best product in the world, but you're not having any meetings, it's going to be 0, right? Another thing I want to point out is this S, which is how good you are as a salesperson. A lot of founders are very self-conscious of the fact that they're not as good as the salespeople they know. This actually doesn't matter that much. And in fact, it really doesn't matter at all for founder-led sales, because at this stage, we don't really care about S, right? We're going to drop the lowest, if we're thinking about like O of N, right? We're going to drop like the constants. That's a constant, right? So one thing I want to emphasize here is that really what we're focusing on is P, which is really insights, right? Insights are what lead to PMF. So, what is that?
Mathematically, it should be to the power of P.
Should what be to the power of P?
If it's 0, then R equals S. Then essentially,
Yeah.
you should get revenue by hiring more salespeople, which is kind of true.
Yeah. So take this with a grain of salt, but given certain constants, like this is kind of how you can think about it in the early stages.
Yeah, and there's multiple lenses to view this through, by the way. Like one that I personally view it through is 3 things, like observability, experimentation, and then scale. When you're at the earliest stage of just observability, your focus should be entirely around how do I get, based off of what I'm doing, what is it converting into, and then how do I eventually experiment, try different channels, also have observability into those channels and figure out what works so that I can scale it up. And when you start thinking about it from that perspective, it becomes much more important, and you start to understand why. Like you really want to know the numbers and understand what's doing what within the business.
Totally. Okay, so how do we increase P? So there's a bit of a cycle here, but it all comes down to generating meetings. So actually, P might be the most important for purposes of this equation, but actually N is what kind of creates everything, all the opportunities. So more meetings equals more insights, which allows you to get closer to PMF. Would anyone disagree with that?
Question. So you're saying PMF is already achieved and then you do this, or are you saying you achieve PMF through these conversations?
Yeah, so by next slide. So the goal of these early conversations is actually insights and PMF. It's not revenue. In fact, you can get revenue in the wrong direction, and it can be like, it might feel good, but it could take you off course completely if it's the wrong customer.
Yeah, the core goal with these very early founder-led sales is insights that feed back into the product that allows you to kind of bring the experience closer to what will, up the revenue. And that only really comes from having a very close, very tight feedback loop with, design partners, pilots, customer advisory board, that type of stuff. A lot of people completely ignore it. They think, oh, if I build it, they will come. That doesn't happen. Your distribution is your everything. If you build your company, there's no distribution, you're, kind of screwed.
There's some founders I know that will come up with the distribution first and the idea second, like knowing I can reach this audience, what products can I sell into this audience? So before PMF, I would advise figuring out PMF. After PMF, get more opportunities. That's kind of the next step. And then finally, and this is like when you're kind of hitting your Series A, that's when you want to think about bringing on a sales team. Not before that. Because when you bring on a sales team, you lose insights. And in fact, salespeople, they're optimized for generating revenue. They're not going to turn down an opportunity that might not be good. And that brings us to the largest mistakes that founders make. This is what I see here, not in any particular order, but obviously, step 1, you don't sell at all. Obviously, you can't move forward if you don't sell. Scaling sales too early. Founders love to not sell, especially technical founders. Again, for reasons I just mentioned, there's a lot of issues with that. Actually, probably the most dangerous is misinterpreting the insights. There's an entire book called The Mom Test, which walks you through how you should interpret what people are saying. But a really common issue is, someone validates you by saying that's cool, and you go off and build that feature for 6 months, and you ended up building the wrong thing that they ended up not paying for.
Yeah, like the insights and feedback that you're getting, for example, your peers here in Foundations, will differ vastly from the people you reach out to cold to try your product out, is like a way to view it. And everyone should read the mom test. It's very valuable. It was something that we made all the entrepreneurs at the incubator read too.
Yeah.
So it's like a core tenet of the customer discovery thing. Like read it. Do not miss this.
Yeah, I know a lot of you are probably here because you're interested in how do I generate meetings, but really the meeting itself is actually super important. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about that today. But yeah, just, I've seen founders also, they try cold email once and they say it doesn't work and they just give up. The problem with that is that if you're wrong on that assumption, then your competitors will win because they figured out a way to make it work. So you should treat all these channels more like experiments rather than like, it didn't work, therefore I can't do it. Maybe you need to tweak your messaging or your audience, right? Like there's a lot of things you can do, so be careful with that one.
And to add to this, like cold email at scale, consider it essentially solved. Like if you're spinning up domains, warming them up and launching, you're kind of set in stone. The hard part no longer becomes doing that stuff at scale. It now becomes one, the generation of the lists of the people that you reach out to, and then two, the messaging and the campaign and the sequencing that you use to try to get responses. So that's why like there's so much weight right now, and like do it manually. Just really understand what's getting you to those like 10 to 15% respond rates based off the targeting that you're doing, and then your positioning and the messaging for each ICP, and you're kind of golden. So that's kind of another formula to view things through the lens of. ICP, what's the positioning and the messaging, and kind of just iterate there until you have the response rate that you want with your campaigns. Then you can start blasting, but don't spray and pray that. Like that's just one channel, obviously, but don't spray and pray that channel and burn it early on and think it doesn't work.
Yeah, so.
Sorry, yeah?
What do you guys think about targeting early customers? Like it's obviously not about revenue, it's about the feedback, but using that as a mechanism to ensure that you're actually getting meaningful feedback.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're going to get to that, but obviously you need to ask them to do something in order to validate that they actually want that thing, right? I do want to mention, by the way, I forgot to mention this earlier, the last 20 minutes is a hands-on workshop. We're actually going to be generating a list of our target prospects and sending out an email. So hopefully we'll get an opportunity to actually put some of this to action.
Can you comment on the wasting time on enterprise customers?
Yeah. Okay, so let's say you've been in discussions with a company for 4 months because you have to go through legal, you have to get SOC 2 compliance, you have to implement features that only they asked for, but at the end of it is a huge revenue contract. As a startup, do you think you should spend that 4 months on that contract versus on smaller contracts, but like larger quantity? What do you think the answer to that question is? Anyone? Yes or no? Why?
You basically are betting your entire company very early on a pretty low probability deal that could get drawn out way too long.
Yeah, and just for the microphone, basically you're betting your entire company on one single low probability deal. If it goes through, it's not necessarily validation that anyone else is going to buy that. My very first company, it was a $500,000 to $1 million contract with Valve. We realized no one else wanted to buy the product, and we spent a year just on that one customer. So definitely not a good strategy. Okay, so I think this stuff is pretty clear. Why founders must sell. Basically, as a founder, people want to talk to you, but no one wants to talk to the salesperson, especially if no one knows your product, what it is, and also like, how do you know a salesperson is doing well or not well if you don't have a benchmark to measure them against? There's a lot of just obvious reasons why. Just like, if this is not obvious to you, let me know and I'll stop and explain more. But I'm going to go through that to the next slide. So what does the founder-led sales framework look like? It's basically 5 steps here. You come up with a hypothesis. You then test your hypothesis by meeting with customers. And hopefully you're able to convert pilots to contracts. This is a cycle that repeats. The more cycles you get before you run out of money, the greater chance you have at not dying as a startup, which should be the goal. Where companies fail is they end up going through 1 cycle per year, right? Really the whole point of this talk is like, how can you increase the cycle rate? right? By just kind of like, I think a lot of you people, like you guys know how to increase the cycle rate, but I'm gonna like reinforce it just to make sure that like no one falls into this trap, because it's very easy to fall into this trap. Okay, so we're gonna develop a hypothesis later, but I wanted to give you 4 different examples of what this looks like. The TLDR is, it's very simple. If you can't explain the value that your product offers and the problem and the ICP in one sentence, you don't actually know what you're doing. So the first step is to figure out what this is, and it's okay to guess, but you need to solve one thing with your startup. Like your entire product should do one thing, and it should do one thing for one specific person, and that's as far as you need to go. And ideally, you should be testing one of these at a time. It really doesn't take much to test this. Like maybe for me, like I talked to 10 customers about that kind of meet the ICP criteria, and I'll know whether or not I'm on the right track or I need to revise my hypothesis. That's all it takes to like asking the right questions and kind of staying out of the traps the mom test will teach you. You can just have 10 discussions to just actually get through this where you're validating hypotheses. I haven't mentioned product at all yet. Does anyone have questions about formulating hypotheses? This is like step 1 in the cycle.
So you start with the hypothesis and then go back to the ICP?
You start with a hypothesis, which includes an ICP, a value proposition, and a problem. And then you test it. Okay, so how do we find our customers? Well, I'm not going to spend too much time on this because a lot of you people know how to do this. There's a lot of tools out there that provide lists. These are some of my favorites. Parsa, maybe you can talk about some of the ones you like a lot really quickly. But one thing I want to mention here is it's not just about getting lists anymore, because today, GTM has completely changed from a couple years ago. AI has saturated the entire outbound market, and everyone's getting spam. So the strategy now shifts to being very high quality with your outreach. You have to spend time reaching out to people if you want them to respond. And it's not worth your time reaching out to a poor quality list. That's basically why I built Haystack. But like, you know, this is the general framework that you should go through anytime you have a list. You need to start with like a large list, and you need to figure out like what's the 5% in that list that you're actually going to go after, and you're going to spend a lot more time going after that list.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. There's also like one more category of tools that I've been using myself recently that I would probably include nowadays, but it's, I'll give you one specific example. It's like social listening. So let's say you're a company that's building a virtual try-on API. So you're able to take an image, take a photo of a model, puts the clothing on the model, bam, that's the whole product. How do you meet your customers during the discovery phase? How do you find them when they're actively searching for a solution like this? There's typically like SEO and running ads on high intent keywords. But another thing is just communities like Reddit, maybe niche specialized computer vision communities for that specific product, newsletters, Substacks, Medium, articles, etc. There's always content coming out about these topics. And if you're one that's solving a problem for those people, you want to kind of get in front of them. So I've started using like specifically Octolens, but there's a lot of different brand monitoring social listening tools for this. I like Octolens because it's 2 people that run it as like really, really scrappy team. I've talked with the founders. They're really like hustling for what they're doing. But it gives you an opportunity to have a feed of all the different conversations happening on the internet regarding like the problem you're solving. So then you can insert yourself into those conversations. And like we all know how important like SEO is over time. It compounds. So the more you insert yourself into these conversations, you can do some very scrappy customer acquisition through channels like that very, very early on. So that's another thing I would maybe mention.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually maybe one more column I might just have you guys think about here with the hypothesis is timing. When do they have this problem? Is it all the time? Is it only when certain things happen? For example, if you're building a recruiting tool to help with the hiring process, it probably only matters when that company is hiring, right? And so think about like what are the digital signals that I can find that map to like them actually being qualified now, right? A lot of you might think that the company always has that problem, right? But it's not that simple. The ICP has specific needs and desires that are different from the company. So, and you have to basically get them to respond to you. So do you understand what those are? Is there a way for you to basically pick up on those signals and use that as your target when you're doing outreach?
Yeah, essentially what are the situations in which your ideal customer would be most receptive to what you're offering. And again, that all goes back to that discovery phase. Put yourself in the shoes of them, empathize, figure out what would I be searching if I was them right now? What would I be looking for? How do I insert myself so that they see me as the solution when I'm looking in those places? If it's an industry that's niche and there's like a top podcast that talks about all the latest and greatest, then you probably want to get on there. If it's a community that's really big on like a subreddit, you probably want to insert yourself into that subreddit. Like, it's very on the ground and scrappy, but it's also very important, right? Just get yourself in front of where they're searching, where they live.
Yeah, so I'm going to show you guys a quick example of this. I'm going to skip forward. I'm part of this Health Tech Nerd Slack community, and this guy is he's raving about the competitor, Clay, right? So like, you might think that I'd be terrified, but like, I actually messaged him and I was like, so the whole value proposition of Haystack is generate a leads list in 5 minutes or less. So I wanted to know, hey, this great list you created, how long did it take you to create it? 7 hours, right? So that opened up an opportunity to be like, hey, what if you could do that in 5 minutes, right? And so you're kind of like listening for stuff like this. You might think it's unscalable, but that's totally fine at this stage. Like, even like join the Reddit communities, like figure out if there's online communities where your customers live, and just start listening and trying to provide value, but also using it as a way to potentially generate conversations like these. Okay, so what channel should you use? As Parsa said, it depends. But there's a few that I think work for most people. LinkedIn, obviously, Sales Navigator. A lot of you are finding customers on LinkedIn. That's a really good place to start. You might try phone calling or email. I know one person mentioned phone calling. We can talk through maybe some cold call strategies at the end. I've done it before. Cold calling, by the way, is one of the most effective strategies because people are afraid to do it. Yeah, but that's why it works. Okay, so this is a very opinionated message. There's a lot of different things you can try, but the general principle is psychology. People still read messages, but they're way less likely to respond to them now because of how many they get. So messaging really matters, and there's a lot of different frameworks. In fact, at the end, we're going to share a resource that Parsa found that has 140 pages of workflows that you can look at. But here's one that I really like from Mom Test because it's specific to founders, and it works really well for founders. I use this all the time. And you can basically kind of insert, this is a template, we might actually do this later today in the workshop. Just take this and modify it for you. But the thing to know is that when you're a founder reaching out to your customer, it's not about your product at all. It's about it's about you asking them for their time as a founder so that they can help you out. That's really the ask you're making. And so if you try to pitch a product, it's like shooting with a blindfold on. Like, you have no idea what you're aiming for yet. And so it's way better to take this approach where you're kind of like following this vision, framing, weakness, pedestal, ask framework. And this comes directly from the Mom Test, if anyone's curious. In fact, I've seen these messages used on me a few times from other founders. But you can customize this as you want. Content marketing works. Anad, one of our members, I try to feature our members in these examples. He got a couple customers from this post. And so I think another thing to keep in mind is this all works together. If you're reaching out on LinkedIn and you're also posting on LinkedIn, there's going to be some crossover, right? All of a sudden your outreach is going to be more effective as well as your content strategy. LinkedIn, by the way, one of the good strategies I would recommend anyone doing is just start connecting with your customers, and over time you'll have an audience for all your posts, right? And then they'll see you as authority when they check out the profile. There was a question earlier. I apologize for not getting to that, but okay, sorry about that. Do you have anything you want to add about content marketing? Or?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was the whole generating meetings section. I think the one thing I want to reinforce is that the strategy I've seen work really well for founders right now is do 10 a day. Allocate a chunk of your day, like an hour, block it off your calendar, and do 10 per day. And that's it. If you just follow that, you'll be in the top 3% of founders. And honestly, if I was an investor, I would just look at which founders are actually doing this 10 per day. I think it would be a really easy way to increase the chance of success. Your first 10 might be complete failures. You might not get any responses because you're sending the wrong messages, you're using the wrong channels. But if you just keep doing this, you will figure it out. This is you should be generating 1 to 2 responses from the 10 messages that you send out. Do you want to add any metrics that you're seeing too?
Yeah, I mean, if you're doing, let's say, cold email, for example, and you're only getting 1 to 3%, that's okay, but you can definitely bump it up. So I think what this all always circles back to is, yes, at the end of the day, it's just 10 a day. And by starting at 0 and sending those emails, you're able to iterate over time, understand your customer better, and pitch, resonate with them with the proper positioning and messaging to actually get a higher response rate. Let's say now you're in the 10 to 15%. That's when you start to think about, how do I scale this up and maybe approach this more programmatically rather than do it all manually. But I really do think at its core, the most important thing you can do is do this stuff manually before discrediting it, and just stick to the 10 a day. See where that gets you in a month from now. I think you'll see a lot of benefit from it.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a takeaway from this entire presentation, it's do 10 a day, and then the second one would be kind of added onto that, start manual, and then scale it up once you know how it works.
Because there's a lot of hype out there for go-to-market, AISDRs, yada, yada. But again, focus on the fundamentals. That's what actually matters. Don't get too carried away. I think once you've found messaging that resonates, that's when you start to move. Yeah.
The tools are just there to help you automate, but until
Yeah.
you know what is working, don't start automating.
Yeah. 10 to 15% is what you're aiming for, response rate.
When you say do this manually, which part is manual?
The writing of the email, the writing of the message. There
Thinking
are some tactics you can use to basically help you generate a list, because that's the other part that's really time consuming, is how do you get that high quality list. There's tools like Clay, Haystack that help with that. But when it comes to actually doing the outreach, write it by hand until you know what gets a response. And you can have a template that you copy and paste over, but then you kind of wordsmith it for each person. That's actually how I do it.
Yeah, there's like infinite flexibility as you get later along with this, but when you're starting out, like try to maybe automate like finding the contact information and some parts of the list building, because that can be very time consuming. But when it comes to, again, positioning and messaging for each ICP, like I want that to be like the thing that really sticks in your brain. That's what you're experimenting with the different messages. That's what you're trying to track, have proper observability, see over time how your response rate varies. Don't just do this with like, dart throws in the dark. Like actually like get a good sense of where things are headed over time. Otherwise, you don't know where you're going.
What do you like to use for tracking the performance of your messages?
I guess it depends on the tool that you use. If you're using LinkedIn specifically and you're running a campaign on Dripify, it'll do that for you. If you're doing it more manually, you might have to just use a spreadsheet. I guess there's a lot of different tools for that out there. In the past, though, I think DuckSoup, Dripify, those are pretty popular ones that keep coming up.
Yeah, and then my answer is like I do it all manually.
Yeah.
So you're just not, like the numbers just aren't that much. Actually, every week I just say like, how many replies did I get? How many meetings did I have? Like it'll take you, a few minutes to like look through the week of activity.
Is like, this was the type of message I was sending. How's that message performing?
So the way I do it is I keep it on the hypothesis level. So this is my Notion. This is where I keep everything. I basically have one hypothesis I'm testing at any given time, and for every customer I talk to, I track whether or not, like, where are they in the buying cycle, and then like which hypothesis are they tied to, and like that's all I need. Like the rest of the time I spend just actually doing the work. So TLDR, like, don't get bogged down in these tools. Like really just spend the time sending the manual messages, and it's really not.
Everyone does it differently. Like for me, the framework I follow is like, all right, who is the ICP? What is the messaging and positioning that I'm experimenting with for this, run of the thing? And then those are the things that I typically tweak as I try different experiments. So again, like there's many different ways to structure it mentally. Just have some way to like form a higher level understanding as you're doing this again. And then I think, Kavi, you had a question?
Yeah. More of a tactical question. How are you making sure you're not like degrading your emails when you're sending out? Because I'm just
Yeah. So when you send 100 emails a day, you have to spin up different domains, because if you use your main domain, then you're risking your email reputation. One of the new trends that have happened in the last year is the email spam filters have gotten a lot better.
Extremely good.
So this is another reason why we say don't scale right now. Use your main domain and just send 10 emails a day, and you won't have a problem with this at all.
Yeah.
You won't even have to worry about it. What?
We're way past that. Yeah, we're sending out cold emails every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but we ramped it up over time, over 6 months, but our emails are really stale. Anyway, I'm just curious what you guys think.
Yeah.
I'm going to say one thing immediately, like never use your primary email that you're doing the transactional stuff with on the main domain. And then also never do your marketing emails or your cold email on your main domain. do variations like try yourstartupname.com or get yourstartupname.com or, just once email reputation has been hurt, it is very, very hard to recover it. And you won't ever know if you're landing in those inboxes or not unless you're using some of the tools that are specialized for this. And it's very likely that if you are just blasting out cold emails without much thought from your primary domain, it's already been kind of affected by the cold email that you're doing. So it might be a good idea to just get a variation. And again, 10 a day won't hurt you. If you're doing 10 a day with 10, 15-minute gap between each email as you think it through, that's not going to damage your reputation. But once you start to get to 100, if you're starting without any warm-up and doing that, it's going to kind of tank deliverability and get you on blacklists. Yeah.
We're going to get to that.
Yeah.
So when you're ready to scale, there's a ton of tools, right? There's a ton of stuff.
I've burned myself there.
Yeah. So again, just one more thing. The reason why I still recommend using your main domain is because when your domain is at risk, you will not be sending bad emails.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
And if you're doing it at the scale that we're discussing, you also don't need to worry about it because it's just not that many.
Yeah.
Use the tools to make sure you're getting valid emails. Basically you can get these risky emails that are called accept all. Don't use those. Just use emails that have an MX record of not accept all that are valid emails.
Yeah.
There's a lot. We can go into email tools
into
later.
the tools. It might be helpful.
We need to keep moving though. So I want to talk about meetings because these are super important. How do we handle our meetings? These are some quick pointers for you. But basically, when thinking about your first meeting to closing the deal, there's 5 steps. The way that I think about this, you have your discovery meeting where you're qualifying them. They're not qualifying you. You're qualifying them. You're deciding whether or not they're worth your time. And a lot of it is asking questions, getting them to talk. Do not talk, literally try to follow this rule and check it. You should always be using meeting transcription tools, always, because it's so valuable, especially with AI for helping kind of automate all the follow-up stuff, which is an area you can automate. And just for learning, it's really helpful. So we're going to go through the first meeting because that's a really important one and a majority of your work will be in this first meeting. This is kind of how it should look like. And again, my first meetings tend to be only 15 to 20 minutes, so I don't actually go this long. But really, this is kind of the framework. The most important part here is discovery. So the mom test will give you the right questions to ask. I'm also going to show you a template here. But some do's and don'ts, never talk about what they will do in the future. Only ask them questions about what they've done. And do not talk about the solution at all, just talk about the problem. Those are the kind of I would say the 2 biggest takeaways that you should internalize now. And then if it's going well, yes, do pitch them and try to schedule the next follow-up meeting on the spot. If it's not going well, then ask them for referrals. Just follow that framework. I think you'll be pretty good.
More about that? If it's not going well, then
if they don't have the problem, you can say okay, it's clear you don't have the problem. Literally tell them that. Don't try to pretend like they might. Be okay, it sounds like you're not a good fit, but now that you know what I'm doing, do you know anyone who might be experiencing this problem that I can talk to? If you did a good job at establishing rapport and you got them talking, which people love, they will share contacts with you. Another important thing to keep in mind here is never end neutrally. It's either a great meeting or a bad one, but it's never neutral, right? And by the way, bad meetings are not bad. They're insights, which is the most important thing. So just keep that in mind. You never want to drive a meeting without having a definitive yes or no. Getting them to commit to some things. There's 3 things you can get them to commit to. 1, referrals. 2, a second meeting. 3, and this might be later, but you can get them to sign a letter of intent, which basically is nothing. But the fact that someone has to sign it means their reputation's on the line, and they won't do it unless they're legit. So those are the 3 things you can ask people to do in this early stage without having a product. Here's some questions. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, but this whole deck will be shared with all of you at the end, as well as a meeting recording, so you can dive into these later. We talked about ending the meeting already, but again, these are tactical steps for after you end the meeting. Timing is really important, obviously. We're not going to talk about this, but inexperienced founders will take the red flags as a good sign, so be careful there. So the demo, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this one either, but basically, you know, you want to get them to an aha moment. Every demo is about a single moment where the light bulb turns on for them. And you want to try to have that basically on the demo, and it should end with onboarding. Onboarding can be another meeting, depending on who you need to get on the call, but it could actually happen at the end of the demo if it's going really well.
Onboarding, signing them up for the product.
Yeah, getting them to use the product in a pilot. Now this is where it starts to differ depending on how enterprise you are. But basically, when I do a pilot, I try to get them to pay something, and I say whatever I need to get them to pay me something. Oh, I'll give you your money back if it doesn't work out, whatever. You know, you can ask for a full refund within 2 weeks, that kind of stuff. Get them to pay you something though, because you do not want to onboard users at this stage for free unless you're a consumer product. Because you can actually get the wrong people using your product that steer you in the wrong direction. And when you finally ask for the payment, you realize this entire cohort of users would have never paid. Seriously, it happens. Just because they're using it doesn't mean they're going to pay. Okay. I know I'm going through this fast, but yeah, we've got a lot of content here. So yeah, this is just kind of how to handle the end of. So basically, after you onboard a customer, a really good thing I like to do is I add them to a dedicated Slack channel. That way, I don't have to email them. I can communicate, message with them directly. We get so much better responses when we're on Slack. It's crazy. It's way easier to get a response on Slack than it is on email, right? Because think about them. An email, they have to compose it. It's stuck with all the other spam, but Slack, it sticks out. It's right where they're communicating with their team already. Add them to Slack on the demo call if possible.
What do you do with clients who don't use Slack in their day-to-day?
Yeah, don't invite them to Slack. Yeah, more old school clients, figure out where do they communicate? Maybe get their phone number, right? Maybe they're comfortable with calling. Maybe you just call them once a week and they know who you are. So you make sure they add your number into their phone book, stuff like that. If you can establish a better communication channel, texting is actually really good. If you can follow up on a text and you get text going with them, then that's great too. Okay, reviewing contracts. Basically nobody knows how to deal with pricing at this stage. The goal here is actually not to charge them a lot. It's to figure out how much they value the product. Does that make sense? You want to know how much they're willing to pay, but you don't necessarily want to optimize for payment right now. You want to optimize for understanding how much value are they getting. And the reason why you want to also price high, though, is because you want to make sure that they actually value this product. If they're only willing to pay a few cents, or they're comparing it, cost by cost with another product, you should not move forward with your idea, right? Unless your idea is specifically about a lower cost version of the product, which again is a tough startup to do. You want to charge more than the competition, so you know that you're offering more value in their mind than the competition is. Okay, quick section on tools here. So a lot of this is, I would say you can use this at the beginning, and once you start to think about scaling, you can incorporate more of these tools. But again, Sales Navigator and DuckSoup, I think someone mentioned they use DuckSoup. It is a great place to start. Most everyone is on LinkedIn, and Sales Navigator Saved Searches can get you your starting point list. And from there, you can kind of use tools like Clay or Haystack to kind of make that list really high quality. Do you have anything you want to add? If
you're doing LinkedIn outreach, get a Sales Navigator account, because LinkedIn is less likely to ban you. This is really dumb, but it's really, really important. I did LinkedIn campaigns for a dozen, 2 dozen founders, and we had one instance where somebody got temporarily suspended, and it was because they weren't paying. Everybody else that was completely fine. So they actually do heavily put preference towards, because why would they want to boot you off their platform if you're paying them, right? It's a simple thought, but people typically miss it. Plus, there's just a lot of value that you get from the platform. I mean, that's where most lists get built. It has the most massive amount of data on B2B customers. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I already covered this, but this is how I track stuff. As you can see, the rule of the game here. The reason I put this slide right next to the tools is just keep it simple. If you're spending a ton of time trying to set up your CRM and make it perfect, you're scared of doing sales, which is fine, but just keep that in mind. It's about the outreach. That's what matters.
And there's also I will say, if you're one that doesn't like to do all the organization yourself, nowadays there's like things like Adio or Get Clarify, which are CRMs that like every email that you send with an account will automatically get associated with that account inside of that CRM. You can associate the meeting notes inside of it too, because I know Get Clarify as a built-in meeting note taker. Like if that type of organization is something that you want to think about, which honestly for me sometimes that's the case, then I would use one of those tools to associate all that information together there, and then mostly focus on positioning, messaging, how can I get my response rate up, and then scale, right? That's where the money comes from, that's where the revenue comes from. It's organizational stuff, just offload it to like the AI note takers and the CRM enrichment tools that are like, newer, but very, very valuable for that type of stuff. And then another thing, I think after this is the workshop, right? Or, gotcha, future of go-to-market. Do you want to add anything before
You can go ahead and talk about this, yeah.
Cool. I guess, who here has heard of like AISDRs? Nice, that's a good amount of people. A lot of the stack behind the AISDR stuff is they're just going out and doing the whole ICP creation. Let's pull a massive list of potential targets. Let's create some sequencing and run our templates as well as like LLMs for some enrichment on the targets, and then let's blast it off. So I guess there is some appeal in the sense that it could be valuable later stage once you found those sequences and campaigns that already get you to 10 to 15%, but also it disconnects you from the learning and the like iteration loops that you get from sending 10 a day. So, and there's also like, it's very hit or miss because a lot of the people building these AISDR companies like maybe haven't actually run their own, scrappy, different like startup before. So you don't have the same fundamentals baked in from day one as you would if you're doing it yourself from scratch. So like they're one thing that you can experiment with, sure. They shouldn't be everything that you do, and you shouldn't like correlate AISDRs with the outbound not working. Like there's different ways to approach and do it that you can, yeah, anyways, that's kind of my thoughts on AISDRs I just wanted to share.
Yeah, just a quick background, AISDRs, basically like the way sales worked, it was arbitrage. So a bunch of these companies came in and they just took strategies that already worked and made AI do it. And then everyone got these crappy emails and then it stopped working and they experienced a ton of churn. So AI SDRs can still work if you have a good brand. But the problem is that like if it's working, you could probably do a better job yourself. So you're like leaving customers, it's kind of like a bad situation either way. Again, figure out how to do sales. And then once you figure it out, you can start scaling it up. Some of our members will actually hire contractors to help run the like LinkedIn outreach, even though they're still in control, they can kind of see everything. There's ways that you can bring people in, but you have to be in control of it. You can't just hire a black box to do it. You won't learn anything that way.
I briefly talked about social listening and brand monitoring tools. I really do think if you're doing founder-led sales from day one, they're valuable for getting a pulse on the people that you're targeting and what they're thinking and what questions they're asking and the latest and greatest stuff going on. So I think the core thing there, it's like you want to meet your customers where they are, and that kind of tool lets you meet your customers where they are. So check out, I'd suggest Octolens because it's another startup, but there's bigger ones like Awario or Mentionalytics that cost hundreds of dollars a month. Common Room is like the fancy one that costs $1,000. They at their core, they're doing the same thing. They're taking your company, they're taking your ICP, they're finding the keywords your ICP would be searching in the discovery phase or the questions, and they're scraping, LinkedIn, Twitter, Reddit, even just the internet, all of that, and putting it in front of you to insert yourself, right?
Yeah.
You can, yeah.
Sorry.
What's the name of the one you recommended? The startup?
Octolens, I've used it for a while now, and I don't know. It's significantly more affordable than the more fancy stuff. At its core, they're all doing the same thing anyways.
Yeah, it's just like paid ads, right? Like you're paying to be placed when someone is searching for something, but these tools are basically telling you that without you having to put an ad up.
Yeah.
Oh, this person is searching for this, right? It's really interesting. The one thing I just want to say just about AI in sales is there are areas where AI tools are adding a lot of value. And the areas right now are in building high quality lists and segmenting your leads. So if you run a really good high quality campaign, you can use the same message template for every person, and each person thinks it's super personalized to them when it's not. You just segmented really well. For example, let's say you're reaching out to a bunch of organizations in the Seattle area specifically, and you're asking them out to coffee because they're local. you could see why that message would do pretty well, even if it's not really like customized a lot. Segmentation is actually what you want to spend your time doing. And AI tools are actually really good at answering these basic research questions for you. For example, do they have public sign up? Like, do they have a sales team that has SDRs? Like, you can actually, you shouldn't be doing that. Like, you can have an AI basically put together and increase the quality of your list much more substantially. And just imagine what impact that's going to have on your success rate if you're only sending 10 emails a day. It's huge. The other area where AI is starting to help, and this is more recent, is in the follow-up after the first meeting. So from there to close, there's a ton of ways you can use AI to basically automate all the CRM task work, busy work that typically gets done. One thing I love to do is after a call, I will put my meeting transcription into ChatGPT and I'll give it a template and it will customize that template. It will connect my product to exactly what they cared about and write that value proposition. It'll summarize the meeting into 3 bullet points for me. It has substantially increased the performance of my response emails, and I send them right away because I don't have to take all this time to write a high quality email. Those are areas where I would explore, leveraging AI more.
And this is a cool one. Like, we're heading right now in a direction where, like, let's say, even right now, you can kind of go out if you already have a product that's built and works and you're generating revenue, and very, very much so hyper-personalized to like each individual segment and niche by creating like an end-to-end data enrichment pipeline with LLMs and then turning that into, let's say, a landing page per account, Like, literally nothing is stopping you from doing that right now today if you just connect all the data together the right way and then spin up a Visio to create the landing page and publish it to your main CMS or site, right? So like, there's all these really interesting, unique niche approaches. Those are not as important right now because let's focus on fundamentals, right? That's what you want to get down. Send the 10 a day. Again, the intuition that you'll build around the segments and the niches that exist within your target will be very, very valuable for when you build larger lists and start to run your own campaigns based on what you tried that works. But like, as you get later stage, like there's these more ambitious verticalized plays that you can now do within those segments and niches that will get you a significantly higher response rate. The way I like to think about it is you want to treat it like every account is your last. Like, it's like the most important one in the world. How are you going to make sure that they know that you're providing value that they need? So yeah. Before this, do you want to ask if they have any specific tactical
so we're going to
tool
get
questions?
into the next phase, which is workshop phase. So basically, for anyone who wants to do this with me, I've opened up Haystack so that you can generate a leads list with emails and outreach for free. But if not, I'm just going to show you how to do this yourself so you can do it later. And I will use whoever wants to be an example. I'll generate a small leads list for you on the spot. But before that, let's do questions.
Yeah, I was just going to open it up to like, what are some things that you guys are wondering? What are some tools that you have questions about? What are some plays you've seen that you're questioning? Like, where are you at with your go-to-market? What's the biggest pain point that you could benefit from hearing?
So I did I used templates pretty similar to the one you showed from the Mon test for the first little bit as I was developing my product and like genuinely wanting feedback and direction.
Yeah.
Now I don't want feedback as much as I used to. And it's a bit of it would be a bit dishonest to send an email like that. So what do you recommend in that situation when like feedback is helpful, but like not that helpful?
Well, now your new 10 a day, I guess, so to speak, kind of becomes like, okay, you have this, have you kind of created a cohort of people that are feeding you feedback, like a customer advisory board of some sort? Okay, cool. So you kind of have that feedback loop going. You can start to experiment with the selling part by experimenting with your messaging, with your positioning for each ICP. Send those 10 a day, find the 10 people that you really want to say yes and try your product out, and think about every way that you can hit them to get them to say yes. And then later on, through the reps, you can templatize the approaches that you've been doing, right? But start scrappy, start personalized. It's, again, very different when you're actually trying to sell. So you kind of have to start from zero again. But it's, again, trial, error, experimentation, and then once you have that observability over what's working and what's not working, that's when you start to think about, hey, let's scale it up with tools. I don't know, did that kind of sort of help?
Yeah, that helps. I guess what I've noticed is that requests for feedback and advice do a lot better than, trying to pitch your product. And so curious if you have any advice for like messaging.
Yeah, make it feel less like a pitch and more like a value prop. Like give before you ask. Let's say you're that social listening startup that I talked about earlier, and you want people to use it. Why not just start sending social mentions for the company or the account that you're targeting to them, so that they immediately see that, get the value from it, and then they can decide. Let's say you send 3 or 4 different instances of like 5 to 10 social mentions that you think are high intent. They now are they can choose whether or not they want it, and you can programmatically do those type of plays. But I'm just saying, like, think creatively. How can I provide value immediately? What is the value prop that I'm even providing?
Yeah. Okay. So real quick, I'm just going to get you guys started on the workshop portion, and then we'll switch back to questions as people are working. So again, this is optional, but if you go to gethaystack.io right now, and then just sign up for a free account, it should take you right to this project. So again, like there'll be, like you can just sign up and do this. So it's like free credits. You can generate like some leads. So feel free to go through that. Once you sign up, you'll basically get to this project list here. Just press create project and it'll take you to this screen. And so what I'm going to do now is, if anyone wants to volunteer, we're going to try to generate a targeted leads list for you. So would anyone utilize a leads list right now?
Sure.
Do you want to describe your ICP?
To the best of our ability, sure. So we're working with commercial real estate brokers
Okay.
who